So when I heard that our sort of little theme for this year was walk by faith and not by sight, I was kind of confused because it's really hard to walk somewhere if you can't see where you're going or if you don't know where your end destination is.
When I think about walking by faith, I think it stretches us in many ways because by sight, you can't see before us. It's very, very logical. It's uncomfortable walking by faith because we don't know what lies ahead. And in a way, it contradicts our values because, through our own eyes, we don't see things through God's perspective. And I feel like do this, we ultimately follow through Him.
Walk by faith, not by sight. I thought it was more about supernatural things or about crazy testimonies of people being healed and receiving gifts and things like that. But I think the more the year went on, I think it became more about an everyday life, just walking by faith every single day, waking up and believing in the promises and actually understanding them in my everyday life.
I always kind of conveniently and just flippantly believed. I considered it blind faith, but it wasn't faith at all. And this year, for the first time, I really struggled with God. I really struggled, and a bunch of questions that I'd always kind of pushed away started coming up.
Even so, just placing more and more trust in God, it's like jumping into an abyss where you can't really see the bottom, but you're hoping that God will pull you through.
As time went on, I began to be challenged a lot in the area of prayer, especially with the different circumstances that I can't really control.
I would say, throughout my walk, during this time, I realized I definitely have a false sense of securities and things I value in, where it's friends and family, school, all these different things. And I learned that things like that are not guaranteed, but God is.
I realized, there's nothing I can do to change the situation. Even when talking to people, I don't know, I don't have words to say, or I don't, I want to be able to express God's love, but I realized I was lacking in a lot of those areas, and I think it was learning to come to God with prayer, not only just for myself.
One thing I could never grasp was how a loving and relatable God could be so cruel to allow things like my best friend's suicide happen in my life. I started seeking other religions and eventually fell far away from God.
I think this year when I finally came to terms with the fact that I struggle with depression, it was really overwhelming and hard. I think, waking up every day was something that I had to push myself to do, and I just wanted to be lazy and just lay in bed all day and miss class and things. But I think that being in that state, I knew that there was something more. I've experienced more, I've known God more, and I think just being in that state was so hard and so dark. And I think after a while, God began to use people and stories in the Bible and truths to really bring me back to life and breathe life back into me.
I feel that even as a church, when we go to these struggles, it definitely brings unity in the sense that we struggle together. And like I said before, we wrapped each other in prayer, we blessed one another, we served one another, despite all our, all these things that's going around.
When you go through hardships and you have to keep pushing, there's something that really shapes you about that. I think when you struggle and you admit finally that you can't handle it yourself, that's when you start to become closer to God, and when you let down that wall of pride and when you allow yourself to be ministered to by God. I think that's ultimately when it really shapes your relationship with God.
It's what I want. I remember coming to Harvest
with the mentality that I want to grow and I don't want to be complacent in my faith. And I didn't know what I was asking for, but it's good because like God grows through brokenness. So I think there's been a little bit of that, and there's gonna be more of it. But I think that's like the process by which God transforms our hearts. Growth comes with pain. And whenever there is pain, that's whenever you can really depend on God. And that's whenever you can really let God change the situation, not so much by solving everything, which, happens eventually, but by letting Him take control of even the way that you think, even the way that you process things. And that really transforms you from the inside out.
I think this year I've learned a lot of how Christianity isn't just rainbows and butterflies. I mean, yes, it's really essential that God really loves us and His love is so unconditional, but at the same time I'm really starting to understand that God also demands a lot from us. He demands our entire lives, and I think that's a fact that I never truly faced until I came to college.
So something God's been teaching me lately is the depth of the grace. He taught me that it doesn't matter how good I've been, it doesn't matter how bad I've been, His grace was still freely given to me. As I begin to understand the truth, I begin to see things differently. Also things not as a chore, not as a burden, but as a way to give thanks to God for everything He's been doing in my life.
Just realizing that it has to be God who moves first. When I think about walking by faith, is beyond my control. Just having to rely on God.
I think that we've all just really needed to come back to that heart of dependence on God. It's so easy to be caught up in what we have to do, what we have to make happen, or how we have to be, but God is able to use any and all things. It's just something really incredible about Him. It's hard to let Him take control, but it's really so much more rewarding than anything that we can make happen by our own efforts.
And even though I don't see, I'm not out of this wilderness yet. I'm just clinging on to God in the sense that He's been so faithful in the past. I don't doubt how faithful He is, like right now, and what comes out of this.
Yeah, and I remember at the beginning of the year when PB gave a sermon about Peter walking on water, and he was saying how whenever Jesus said, "Peter, why did you doubt?" it wasn't necessarily something as a rebuke, but it was something that triggered hope, because Jesus believed that Peter could do it, and as long as he had faith that he could walk on that water and he could make it to Jesus.
I finally was sincere enough with myself and with God to allow myself to even succumb to their troubles, because I was really good at surfing over them and never really getting my feet wet. But you have to get your feet wet to walk on water.